All right, Christmas. It's that magical time of year, right? But seriously, have you ever just stopped, looked at the tree, the giant pile of presents, and thought to yourself, wait a minute, where did all this come from? Well, let's get into it because the real history of our favorite holiday is pretty wild.
Okay, let's be real for a second. This quote, it kind of hits a little too close to home for a lot of us, doesn't it? It's supposed to be the season of giving, but it's also, the season of frantically checking your bank balance every 5 minutes.
So yeah, where did this whole festival of capitalism and cookies come from? Well, turns out it wasn't always about presents under a tree. Nope. The origins go way, way back. And honestly, they're a whole lot wilder than you're probably picturing.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to jump in the time machine and go way, way back. I'm talking long before the first Jingle Bells was ever sung. See, ancient Europeans were already masters of the winter party. They were throwing these huge celebrations for the winter solstice.
It makes sense, right? Celebrating in the absolute dead of winter, that's a super old human tradition. You had the Vikings with Yule, where they'd basically light a giant log on fire and just feast for days. Then you had the early Germans who were kind of terrified of their god Odin flying around at night, basically checking his own naughty and nice list. Sound familiar? And then, oh boy, then you had the Romans.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Just look at the difference here. The Romans, they had this month-long festival for their god of agriculture called Saturnalia. I'm talking everything shut down, businesses, government, even slaves were given temporary freedom to party. It was a complete stop, which is just a little bit different from the total chaos of last-minute Christmas shopping we're all used to today, isn't it?
So, picture this. You've got all these super popular, kind of rowdy pagan festivals all happening around the same time. The winter solstice. And for the growing Christian church, this looked like a golden opportunity. Which brings us to the next chapter in our story, a very, very savvy rebrand.
Right, so with these huge pagan blowouts happening every single winter, the early church basically thought, well, if you can't beat them, join them. They just needed to pick the perfect date for their big celebration. The birth of Jesus. And here's the kicker. Nobody actually knows Jesus' real birthday. The date, December 25th, was a totally strategic move. They plopped it right down in the middle of all those existing winter parties. Why? Well, it made it way easier for people to get on board with the new holiday if they didn't have to give up their traditional party time. I mean, from a marketing perspective, absolutely brilliant.
So Christmas starts to spread, and it does so for centuries. But its future wasn't always guaranteed, not by a long shot. In fact, there was a point in history where the whole party just came to a screeching halt.
Fast forward to the 1600s. Christmas is a big deal, a well-established tradition. But then, over in England, the government gets involved and does something pretty shocking.
That's right. They canceled it. Just poof, gone, outlawed. The entire holiday was straight up banned by the government. And who was behind this? A very devout Puritan leader named Oliver Cromwell. He and his followers basically thought the holiday was, it was just too much fun. They saw it as wasteful, morally corrupt, and this was their big selling point. The celebration isn't actually mentioned anywhere in the Bible.
Well, you can probably guess how this went over. People were furious. The ban was so incredibly unpopular that public outrage just boiled over. And sure enough, after Cromwell died, Christmas was officially brought back. Guess you just can't keep a good party down for long.
All right, so Christmas is back on the menu. But it still wasn't really the holiday we know and love today. It needed one last huge makeover. And that all went down in the 1800s, thanks in large part to a couple of writers you've probably heard of.
First up, you have the American author Washington Irving. He started writing these stories that painted Christmas as this peaceful, cozy time for families to get together. Then Charles Dickens comes along and just completely doubles down with A Christmas Carol, which, let's be honest, is a ghost story that basically warns you that if you're not full of holiday cheer, ghosts will mess with your head until you are. And just like that, these stories totally reshape Christmas into the family-focused, feel-good holiday it is today.
And of course, the 1800s is when we get our modern Santa Claus. And he was based on a real person, Saint Nicholas, a super selfless Turkish monk who literally gave all his money away to help the poor and sick. Over the centuries, that story evolved into the jolly, gift-giving icon we have today. Basically a global brand for generosity.
And that journey brings us all the way to today. After centuries of changes, from wild pagan parties to Puritan shutdowns to a Victorian reinvention, we finally arrived at the Christmas we all know and experience
every year. I mean, it's a holiday that now has its own unique modern traditions, right? We've somehow gone from feasting around a giant burning log to traumatizing our kids into thinking a little felt elf is a spy for a guy at the North Pole. It's really been quite a journey.
So when you think about it, from ancient pagan ragers to today's corporate brands, Christmas has never, ever stayed the same. It's always changing, always being reinvented. And that just leaves one big question, right? The version of Christmas we have right now, it's not the final one. So, who's going to reinvent it next?